Welcome to Living Well Naturally. I'm Dr. Anna Saylor, KSD chiropractor and owner of Van Every Family Chiropractic Center, located in Royal Oak, Michigan. My patients from 3 hours old to 103 years young all have one thing in common. They want to feel better. Together we will share and explore a healthy lifestyle to help you be the best you possible. It is my goal to provide you with information, insight, experience, and motivation that allow you to feel better and put you on the path to living well naturally. Today we're going to discuss what it's like being a caregiver and how to find ways to stay physically and mentally healthy when you're giving all you've got to help someone else. Joining me are Dr. Marissa Heisel from Spines and Mind Transformational Health, Linda Rose, Director of Sales and Marketing from Walton Wood Senior Living, and Sally Justice, Communication Manager from the Area Agency on Aging. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. Let's talk about how to handle emotional burnout. Sally, how does a caregiver suffer emotionally, and what are some ways to alleviate emotional burnout?
Yeah, I think caregiving is just such an overwhelming experience for many people because they're dealing with caring for their loved one, obviously, and then they're also probably managing a job and family and also trying to take care of their own household and themselves. We really try to encourage caregivers to stay connected and to take time for themselves every day to do something that gives them joy, whether it be 15 minutes, a half an hour, 3 hours, a weekend, but really plan to make time for yourself. Could be reading, could be games, it could be sports, athletics, a walk, could be just resting, gardening, interacting with friends, having lunch, having a conversation over the phone. Those types of things can be really empowering, connecting with others.
Nice. And what about you, Linda? Any suggestions?
I find that the caregivers that will experience burnout don't ask for help. And I think that that's probably one of the most important things. The National Family Caregivers Association, that's one of the things that they really encourage caregivers to do, is make sure you're asking for help and involving other people in that caregiving. So reaching out to other family members and giving people turns and creating calendars, and not only for the mind, body, spirit, for the caregiver themselves, like Sally had said, making sure that you get some exercise and take a lot of rest and be able to tune out. And there's a lot of programs out there through the Alzheimer's Association, private senior living companies like the one that I work for, have respite programs. So you can actually utilize a respite program for someone that you're caring for to give yourself a break as a caregiver, to take a vacation or to visit family members out of town or just to unplug.
Which is nice. What about you, Doctor?
I'm curious, do you find that most of the people caregiving, do you find there's a greater percentage of women versus men?
It's definitely like a 60-40. The average caregiver is, over the age of 45, has children at home and is
That's exactly
managing a job and
not taking care of themselves. We see it in our practice a lot, where you take care of everybody else and you take care of yourself last.
Yeah.
So.
But what Sally said is what I see a lot of in my practice as well, is women who still have either young children at home, even children in high school, or maybe even grandchildren that they're caring for, depending on the age of the person that they're caring for. And that is such a burden, an extra load on so many women who don't generally ask for help, which is one of the things that you were saying is so absolutely essential. Women by and large don't ask for help. And then if you're taking care of a younger generation and an older generation, there's that extra load that so many women are carrying without asking for sufficient and substantial enough assistance. And that's where I think there's so much burnout for the caregiver that might be going on.
So, what would be some suggestions to ask for? I know I was having a conversation earlier, and it was about just someone to do my laundry and someone to help with the overall taking care of my kids and taking them for a walk or doing something different with them. What other suggestions would you have?
Well, the Area Agency on Aging is a wonderful resource for caregivers to actually call and find out about respite services. As Linda mentioned, you may want to bring someone into the home to help give you a break, to provide housekeeping, to provide even personal care, to prepare meals. You might want to consider home-delivered meals. The caregiver can actually get a home-delivered meal as well, which is really neat. Or you may want to consider adult daycare services, which are programs that are available in the community where you can take your loved one to be cared for during the day for a half a day or 5 days a week, while you either go to work or maybe you have lunch with a friend or something like that.
So there are options out there, just a matter of finding them and actually using them. and not feeling guilty about
Absolutely.
it too, because we're
And that's
seeing
huge.
the
That
guilt.
sense of guilt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We recently spoke with Sue Fabian, who cared for her ailing mother for many years. I first met Sue when she brought her mother into our office for chiropractic treatments to help relieve pain. Let's watch Sue's story.
There's no template for learning how to be a caregiver. Why is that? Because the human race has never had to deal with chronic debility ever before until the last 30 or so years. I got into elder law after my mother had a massive stroke. As I walked with her every day through the healthcare maze, it became evident to me that she needed more of a patient advocate than the skills I had. I moved back in with her a year after her stroke, so I was able to care for her more easily, although caregiving is never easy. What did I do over the 22 years that I was a caregiver? I had a handful of very close friends that I turned to. I had my minister. I had support groups. I had counseling. I had time alone in prayer and meditation. I had time when I went out in the car and screamed my guts out. There's no one way of doing this. I also read a lot, read tons of stuff about the medical conditions that my mom suffered from and about caregiving. Caregiving is exhaustive. No matter how efficient you try to make it, it's still exhaustive. So those are all the things that I did to manage my emotions. But it wasn't without diving into long and deep periods of burnout. It's learning how to navigate the periods of burnout and trying to make them shorter and not as profound. And the key to that comes from inside each of us in setting limits, and have the courage to allow someone to help you. You can learn about the condition, you can learn about the experiences of other caregivers, you can get help from a professional like a geriatric care manager, but ultimately it comes down to your own decision making and making those choices to set limits on your time and energy.
So I think, to me, the biggest thing, that courage is a huge word that, for me, that stood out, because it takes courage to be a caregiver. It takes courage to take care of a parent that you're emotionally, involved with, and to see them start to suffer too. So, what about you, Dr. Marissa?
I think watching somebody that we love suffer is extremely challenging. I saw it from the opposite end of the life spectrum when I was in midwifery, and people's experience of watching somebody that they love in pain, mental or physical, is extremely challenging. I like one of the things that she said. I don't know if these were her actual words, but I often talk to people about being their own best advocates. And she said that she spent a lot of time learning about her mother's condition. And I think we really need to do that when we're engaged in a medical maze, as she called it, on a regular basis, so that on top of everything else, yes, it's more work that we have to do, but it also feels as though we're an active part of a system or of a caregiving team, as opposed to somebody extraneous on the outside and you don't understand what's being said around you. It's not, there's something to that around being as empowered as you can be when you're working within that system.
What about you, Linda?
I think that one of the things that Sue said that resonated with me was that she took time for her prayer and her meditation to kind of still her mind, because as a caregiver, as people, women that work, there's so many things to do in the day and not enough time to do them, and I think we forget to take a step back and to just kind of get back into who we are. And then when she spoke regarding the medical maze, there's so many people out there that just don't understand the different terminologies and the different options for people that are going through chronic illness. And I really think that being able to reach out and get help, and she said that she learned a lot and she did a lot of reading, and I really truly believe that the more we know, the better off we are. And one of the things that I read in a blog a little while back, and it was about a family dynamic where my brother won't help. And it was just that the brother wouldn't help. He just didn't know what to do.
Right.
So when the sister finally figured out that, you know, he can't handle mom herself, but he can mow the lawn and he can do the grocery shopping and he can bring his kids over for some visits so that she has some mother stimulation in the home. When she gave him the jobs to do, her burden became a little bit lighter, and then that's when she could go out and maybe have coffee with some girlfriends or something. But that was really interesting, just to, you know, sometimes people don't know what to do, and so we kind of have to, what they're going to be comfortable with, and then assign them those tasks.
We had, when I was doing some research, it was talking about having a list ready to go of all the little things, and they may not, you know, when you have friends that come over and say, what can I do to help? Here's my list.
Right.
What could you do? Like mowing the lawn, I mean, that would save so much. Or you know, do this or this. And just the you know, having something that maybe he can't do the things that she wanted him to do, but he could do a whole lot more.
Right.
So.
It's funny what you were just saying reminds me of, there are now, in the same way that there are midwives for birth, there are people who call themselves midwives at the end of life. And one of the things that people would always say to me is, well, what do I ask for? If people say, what can I do with a new baby, what do I do? And I would always say things like, ask people to throw in a load of laundry, ask people to help fill your freezer. But it's the same kind of thing. As a caregiver, if you're asking for help, one of the things that would be really helpful would be to have food in your own freezer to feed yourself when you're so immersed in somebody else's experience at the end of life. Something that I've also seen people do, and this would be around somebody younger, somebody maybe who's struggling with cancer or something like that, as opposed to an older person, is they'll organize groups of friends who will do things like everybody takes a meal, you know, and they prepare meals, and there will be a whole group of people who are actively supporting not just the person who's ill, but the person who's mainly caregiving. And it's pulling together resources in your community in a different way, which I think is what you're talking about as well. But these would be actual and somebody would take on the role of organizer.
So we have to take a break, and we'll be right back after this message.
Hey everybody! Heart disease affects 1 in every 3 women in America, but you can fight back. There's no time to lose. Mothers, sisters, daughters, families, and friends, it's time to shout louder, stand stronger, and demand change. Let's go!
To the Batmobile. Dang it.
To the invisible jet!
Dang it.
Together, we can put an end to heart disease. It's time to go red for women. I could use your help. Yeah! Learn more from the American Heart Association at www.goredforwomen.org.
Hart, what's going on?
I'm leaving.
Why? What did I do?
Not enough. The pressure's too much. I quit.
I get it. I can do better. Just please don't leave.
Don't let your heart quit on you. Get your uncontrolled high blood pressure to a healthy range before it's too late.
So, welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Marissa Heisel from Spines and Mind Transformational Health, Linda Rose from Walton Woods Senior Living, and Sally Justice from the Area Agency on Aging. And we're talking about the difficulties of being a caregiver and trying to come up with some ideas to help them stay physically and emotionally healthy. So Linda, your facilities are full of professional caregivers. What are some common physical problems that they often experience, and what kind of preventative measures do you recommend that they take?
The caregivers themselves, it would be to depend on if they're elderly caregivers caring for like a spouse. What I'll find in many cases is that you know, any stress-related disorder, depression, is huge, and it goes undiagnosed for so long. Caregivers sometimes feel that their exhaustion, their sleep deprivation, their depression, their anxiety, that's all just part of it, and they just keep trudging through. And so they go undiagnosed. I was reading something the other day that, you know, the patient themselves might go to the doctor 7 to 10 times during the year. The caregiver might only go 4. And so their problems are going undiagnosed. Stress-related disorders, heart disease, heart attack, stroke. I see that quite often if there's a caregiving situation where maybe a spouse has been taking care of the other spouse for many, many years, and the caregiver often passes away before the patient themselves does because of the stress of caregiving, and then that's when they maybe have to make a decision to you know, make a move into a senior living community. So I do see that quite often, and the depression, because we're talking about not being an island right, on the show today. And so I think that if people are on an island, they might not have so much of that depression because there might be people to lift them up. But there's so many people that are unwilling to let go and have people help. And there's that, lack of a better term, stubbornness. And I do see that in male caregivers quite often, is they made a promise, they're going to do it until they die, and they do it until they die. And then, you know, the children sometimes don't even have a good idea of how much dad did for mom because he was kind of covering that up a little bit. So the more involved the kids can be with their aging parents, even if dad says everything is okay, I do a little bit of digging first.
I know we had a conversation earlier about the suicide rate with elderly, and it was kind of like, actually for me, a little more shocking that, you know, it just was shocking, I guess. You were talking about oils in the, like, in their
homes,
yeah, in the senior homes, yeah.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've seen a lot is a lot of nurse practitioners or nurses or charge nurses will have essential oil diffusers in their own offices and find that residents will come in, and it's one of the things that just sort of helps to lift mood. But if caregivers were using them for themselves, it's going to benefit the people that they're caring for, but it's just a way of naturally enhancing mood, lifting people when they're feeling very low, when their energy may be very low. There are things that we can do naturally that will help us without always needing to rely or resort to something pharmaceutical. But I think that your point is very well taken, that we need to establish first and recognize that what we're experiencing is not just normal.
Right.
You know, sometimes people struggle for so long as caregivers or as others that it's just par for the course. This is just the way it is, without recognizing that that's not the way it has to be.
That there is things that you can do. What about you, Sally? What would you recommend for caregivers?
I think the word isolation, you know, comes to mind. It's just not staying isolated. It's just, you know, reaching out, educating yourself, making sure that you are aware of what's available to you, and you know, taking as best care of yourself as you can.
There was a lot of classes, even like Gilda's Club, which is right down the street from our office.
Yeah.
Like, I always just kind of in my head thought it was for cancer, and, you know, like the classes surrounding that. And there was a lot of caregiving classes. There's a lot of support for all different kind of aspects. So there's a lot of resources out there. It's just a matter of finding the right places.
Yeah.
So
there are support groups that are specific to diseases. There are support groups that are specific to dementia or Alzheimer's. We offer a class called Creating Confident Caregivers, which is a class for people who are caring for someone with dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and it's a wonderful class. It's free, and it's 6 weeks long, and it's a great opportunity for someone to not only learn about the disease, but also how to take care of themselves while they're providing care.
where are the classes located at?
All over Metro Detroit, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they would find it online?
Yeah, they can
Okay.
find it online or call us.
Okay,
Yeah, at
wonderful.
the Erie Agency on Aging. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I think one of the things that might be important as well is hooking into some of those resources while you're in the role of caregiver, because if somebody does pass and that caregiver has been so deeply immersed in working with the person that they've been working with, there can be such a profound sense not just of grief but also of almost displacement. Everything that I've been doing has been for this other person, and nobody else understands how much of my life has revolved around this, that now there's almost a sense of who am I and what am I doing now?
Right.
Yeah.
I see that a lot as well.
Yeah, it's very true. I think caregivers need to know that they're not alone, that there are other people going through similar situations, and that's such an important network of support for people, to talk to other people going through the same thing.
And I think, like you mentioned too, it's important to know, like, you have support afterwards too. That you're, you know, a whole part of who you've been, you still have the people there to support you. One of the things I wanted to talk about too is, and this happens in my office a lot, where, you know, there's a lot of things you should do beforehand, a lot of things you should do before someone gets sick. There's, you know, we sat down as a group, as a family, and my brother and my sister-in-law, my mother and her fiance, and my husband and I, and we actually prepared a plan before. And this is where we just had dinner, we sat down, went through our wishes, everything we wanted, so it was all on the table before anything happened. And then, like, my mom has a copy of ours and I have a copy of hers. So being prepared, I think, is really good. And then also making sure that you have things like wills in place and trust. I know we talked about some options. You have a class that was coming up that you were talking about.
Correct. Yes, our Walton Wood University community is having a class for, it's going to be a workshop over a few weeks, but the first one is the 17th of June. I think it's at 5:30, but Walton Wood University, and it's going to be a workshop that's going to be for people that want to be able to kind of leave their legacy along with their belongings, and it really, the facilitator is going to help teach the people that come to this workshop how to actually bequeath and bestow their prized treasures and their belongings without hurting people's feelings, being prepared, and also leaving a legacy. And that's the thing I really loved about it, is that if there's things around the home that are, you know, family memories, that they're kind of working with people on how to write those stories down, so the story gets passed down with the object. So I think that's a really, really nice idea. And I was reading some articles as well regarding advanced directives, and from 2000, only 47% of seniors were prepared with an advanced directive, and now it's over 70% in 2010. So I think that that was a really good effort, I think, from just the knowledge base. I came into this field in the mid-'80s, and advanced directives were just kind of becoming popular in the early 90s, I think, where people were starting to write them. And just to be careful, in Michigan, the living wills aren't recognized. So if you do live in Michigan, you should have an advanced directives, a durable power of attorney for health care and for your financial, or you can have both. But it's really important to have someone that's going to speak for you if you can't speak for yourself. Having that available. Prepaid funerals, or at least have your funeral wishes taken care of. I know my mom and dad, they had everything. Well, they had me as a child, so they didn't have a choice. But they had their wills and their trusts and their funeral all taken care of, their advanced directives, their medical power of attorneys, and so that was all taken care of. So when my dad passed away, there's no guesswork. You know, it was just that we knew what he wanted. He knew what songs he wanted played at the funeral. He knew who he wanted to have speak for his eulogy. So all those things were taken care of. And I know the same thing when my mom passes, that I'll be prepared as well. And that takes a lot of burden off the children and the family. And if you prepay it, then no one has to worry about that too. It's all taken care of.
Which I think is a good, because having it all done in advance when everybody's, you know, sound of mind, I think is amazing. Because I found out my mom wanted to be cremated, and I had no idea. I was like, oh, all right then, you know, and I was like, well, you can get my coffin at Costco. So I think that's in mine, you know, so. What about you, Sally? Any?
I think those are all wonderful things to be. It's a gift to your children. It's a gift to your loved ones to be prepared. It can be really challenging when a family doesn't know, when those conversations haven't been had, and a family doesn't know their loved one's wishes and they wish to carry them out. It can cause, you know, problems within the family, and it can cause more additional stress. And so it's a wonderful thing when those conversations have been had, and they can be difficult, but I love the way you did it with your family. I mean, it's kind of like a celebration. You know, you get together and you enjoy each other, and you talk about what you really want. So it's a great way to do it.
Because now they know who's doing my eulogy and who's, you know, everything's on the table. And I think that's what's really good, talking about it openly. And then we were supposed to meet, like, you know, every couple of years and just make sure everything's updated, any changes, anything new. The program we use is called After I'm Gone. And then it actually brings everything together, where all our, you know, safe deposit boxes, a copy of our will, everything's in one place too. So there's no questions where anything is. Because I know I had said something to my husband recently, like, if you pass away now, I don't even know our passwords to our computer. Like, okay, you better, because he's got a memory for numbers, and I don't remember anything like that. So, like, please write it down. Any question? Anything for you? Closing statements?
I think my only thought is that when somebody does pass, there's an outpouring of support for the caregiver, for the main family members for a week, maybe two. And then everyone assumes that life goes on. And I think just being there and being present for those people, especially if somebody's been a primary caregiver potentially for years. I mean, I believe we heard 22 years. That's a long time, and the gap and the hole that's left in somebody's life after that takes a lot more than just 1 or 2 weeks of asking how somebody's doing. And so continuing to check in and continuing to be present and follow up and be present. And, you know, in the same way with anything else, once we are no longer in that role, I think that's when we as caregivers might collapse a little bit physically as well, where we might start to really show signs of illness and stress because we've been holding it together for so long.
Yeah, it's the aftermath.
It's the
usually.
aftermath.
Yeah.
And so being present in somebody's life at that point and asking on a longer basis how they're doing.
That's a really good point, because sometimes we forget, you know, like my grandma's 84 and, you know, she's taking good care of my grandpa for years, and when he passed away, like sometimes you forget that she needs that extra support too. So thank you. So any last thoughts? How about you, Sally?
I think that you know, that person who loses someone, the day after the funeral is the hardest day, and it's also things like, you know, them eating alone, and those are really traumatic experiences for the person who loses a spouse, especially. And so, just I agree with what the doctor said. I think really trying to be there for others as much as possible, for as long as possible, is a wonderful gift too.
Okay. And what about you, Linda? Any last?
I just salute the caregivers out there. It's a hard job, and being able to, you know, give up a lot of your life and give that to another person is very, very selfless. And if there's just one thing that, you know, we can learn from today, is that you can be selfish and it's okay, because you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people. And I think that that's probably one of the most difficult things we have.
Right. What about you, Dr. Heisel?
Linda just said something that reminded me, you know, we recognize to some extent that women take care of children when their children are young. There still isn't enough support, but there isn't a real recognition of the amount of work and heart that goes into caregiving for somebody at the end of life. And so really recognizing the importance of being there for somebody at that stage, and recognizing the work that they do and what goes into it.
Wonderful. Okay. I'd like to thank my guests for joining me today. I hope that we've been able to inspire you with new ideas and some suggestions. I encourage you to do some research. Whether you find information on the internet or at your local bookstore, it's worth your time. My goal on this show is to provide you with the information, insight, experience, and motivation that will allow you to feel better and put you on the path to living well naturally. I'm Dr. Anna Saylor, and thank you for watching.